Thank you, Your Excellency, Sheikh Khamis Al Khanjar. Now, our first panel is titled The Middle East Managed Chaos, Assessing the Region's Challenges and Prospects. This session will be chaired by Dr. Dalia Dasa K, Uni of California, Los Angeles, and will feature the following distinguished speakers. His Excellency Hishyar Zebari, former Foreign Minister, Federal Republic of Iraq. Mr. Ferhat Nasrullu, Member of Parliament, Republic of Turkey. Dr. Tariq Youssef, Middle East Council on Global Affairs, Qatar. Dr. Kayhan Barzigar, Institute for Political and International Studies, Iran.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you, MEPS, for having us all here. And it's wonderful to be with these distinguished hosts and this distinguished panel. So we are tasked with looking at both challenges and opportunities and how we manage the chaos. So what we'll do, I think, is we'll start with the chaos. We'll start with the challenges. And what I think would be very interesting is to get the perspective from each place where you're sitting from your vantage point, of what you see as the top threat today. And if you were sitting in MEPS November of last year, because let's face it, this has been a remarkable year. The fall of Bashar al-Assad, 12-day war, bombing of Iran by US and Israel, a strike in Doha, but also positive developments. And so we heard earlier from His Excellency Barzani about bright spots in Syria, peace process in Turkey. So all of this happened in 1 year. So if you were sitting here last year, how versus this year, how do you see the threat environment? And I think we'll go, starting with Your Excellency, we'll start with you, and we'll do kind of a comparative assessment, and then we'll start trying to figure out how we might solve these challenges and threats that are still on your mind. So, Your Excellency, let's start with you.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Masrour Barzani, the chairman of the Board of Trustees, and for MEPS for inviting us and bringing us together in this wonderful forum. As you mentioned, a year ago, imagine a year ago where we were. And who expected or predicted that these massive changes will shake the Middle East and the balance of powers? I mean, the incidents that you mentioned, really nobody here in this forum last year predicted that this regional escalation would reach that level. The Middle East generally, I will quote a friend of mine whom I known for many years, has said, the Middle East is a region of the world where instability is infectious, because everything important is connected. And really, this is our part of the world. We have to be realistic, whether it is a new Middle East or the same Middle East, but definitely the trends, the geopolitical trends, are for changing the pre-Middle East, as it were. Now here, Iraq, as part of this region, has managed to avoid this war on conflict thanks to the government or to the visions they had to maintain some impartiality. But this is temporary in my view. They cannot sit on the sideline. They have to be clear. I personally think the major challenge to Iraq instability, is the regional escalation. I mean, this escalation is not over in my reading. It's not done. It's not been frozen. I mean, it could erupt anytime. And also another challenge is actually for any country that it respects itself. We hear the intervention of the Prime Minister which gave a very positive, rosy picture of the country, its economic, its institutions, but there are some serious challenges. One of the key challenges is the non-state actors rule, or the militias, that every government is promising, pledging to bring them under some control or integrate them. Here, Kurdistan really has tried to be a force of stability, a bridge between Baghdad and the regional neighbors that we have and the international community. So we commend the work of the government for that. Another factor of instability is the fragility of the institutions. We were discussing with some Iraqi friends about how important it is to have this institution strengthened and empowered is another challenge in my view, in my personal view. My last point, and I'll give the floor to my friends, I personally think we need, in this region and Iraq, some certainty about the US forces in this region, the multinational forces. Yes, there are a debate, there are some divisions within Iraq about the presence or the legality of these forces in our territory. But we know, as a foreign minister, national diplomat, I've dealt with this issue with many countries who are hosting foreign troops, but they are sovereign, they are independent, they are there with their consent. And this is what has happened. And I can give you dozens of examples of European, Arab, regional countries.
But not now, no.
Okay, there is no shame of declaring that or showing friendship to that. I'll stop here and then I'll answer your other questions.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So, Mr. Farhad, we're going to move to you. We heard from His Excellency top concern, and let's try to focus, rather than laundry list, really kind of what's keeping you up at night in this current so-called new Middle East, change Middle East, transform Middle East over this last year. Non-state actors was on his list, the regional situation, which is, many things, the question of external forces. How are you seeing it from where you're sitting?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a big pleasure for us to meet today with you. Our region is a crossroad. Actually, we will either slide into deeper fragmentation or manage this chaos, or we will choose a path of stability and prosperity built on cooperation. I believe we still have a window of opportunity to move from manage the chaos to manage connectivity. This means shifting from reacting to crisis to build an infrastructure, institution, and capability that can secure peace and prosperity for our region. Today, I can frame in 3 themes. 1, investing in regional connectivity, especially infrastructure and the new development road. 2nd, unlocking promising sectors such as renewable energy, digital economy, agriculture and tourism and defense. 3rd, comforting global fragmentation by deepening regional integration through free trade agreements. How we will connect to increase our connectivity? Let's say we live in world a high uncertainty area. This from geopolitical tension, supply chain lock, and rapid technology distribution. One of the most transformative example in the new development road is a corridor linking from Gulf through Iraq and Turkey to Europe. It is very important project to increase our relation with the connectivity, not with chaos, but dependency. If we will increase this, we will make a better relations. Now, thanks
Okay, excellent. And we'll return to that, and if other panelists have thoughts about the connectivity, we're already getting to solutions here. But of course, as we know, we need stability for these development plans, but you don't have stability without development. So we have to square that circle. But there also is the question of which connectivity plan. There are many competing plans out there, so I'll be interested in other panelists' thoughts on that. Tariq, why don't we go to you? And maybe if we can start again with the question of what is the biggest challenge? I mean, we've had a very changed year, very many shocks to the system, good and bad. How are you seeing it now, sitting in Doha, but also your broader analytic take?
Thank you, Daisy. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Thanks to the organizers here for inviting me. It's my first opportunity to be in Kurdistan. I've enjoyed my stay, and I'm very pleased to be on this panel. Building perhaps on your question and His Excellency's contribution, and also keeping in mind what Sheikh Al-Khanjar had said is where I'm going to come at this, I think. I think at this moment in time, as we look at the last year, the last 2 years, I think if there is one thing that has become perhaps clear to many people in the region, I say this with a lot of confidence, about not just governments in the region, public in the region, is that the biggest threat to instability at this moment, as has been revealed through a course of actions and aggressions and militaristic policies, for the first time perhaps in a long time, is Israel. There's a growing realization and a consensus amongst actors and countries in the region that the biggest threat is really Israel, especially with its current posture, philosophy, ideology, and outreach and approach and behavior towards countries in the region. This is, for the first time, I would argue, is the case in probably at least 15 years. And it raises, I'd say, fundamental questions about regional security and regional order. And it creates, in my humble opinion, the opportunity that Sheikh Khanjar was hinting at, the need for a new security regional order. For the last 10, 15 years at least, as most of you have observed, the US has tried through various initiatives to create such an order. The order rested on 3 formulas that I think have become widely understood, observed, and I would say enforced through various administrations in the US. The first component of this order was normalize relations between the Arab world and Israel. So the Abraham Accords, the Negev Summit, the East Med Gas Forum. I could name the initiatives where Israel and the Arabs were meant to come together. The second component of the US efforts was contain Iran, isolate Iran, keep Iran weak, threatened, constantly under the prospect of a threat. The third was, and this of course was obvious to many of us, but not as much discussed, the third component of what the US had tried to do was to exclude Turkey from any regional initiatives, whether it is the Abraham Accords or the Negev Summit or the East Med Forum or the IMAC. Turkey was meant to be kept out. All of this, in my humble opinion, has come to a collapse in the last year especially, creating the opportunity through this perception now that regional matters need to be handled by regional countries. That would include the Arabs, but also Iran and Turkey, in a collective effort to bring about regional security, to reinforce the diversification of defense partnerships, to invest in the autonomy that Sheikh Khanjar emphasized in his speech, and to find solutions for the first time by countries in the region. This is an historic opportunity that I think also gives way and an opening for discussions about regional integration, economic cooperation in ways that maybe have not been pursued in at least a generation. My bottom line in terms of the shared threat is the US is not going to save us. Europe is busy. It's up to countries in the region, including Turkey and Iran, to look for the kind of regional order, settlements that will produce perhaps for the first time an arrangement that will be for the benefit of people in the region.
Okay, thank you, Tariq. Nice, good, provocative openings. Of course, we'll return to that question of regional agency. We are seeing a lot more regional solutions forming. At the same time, we just saw last night a UN Security Council resolution passing that was a US drafted document that was supported by the entire, or many of the powerful Arab countries, Turkey and so forth. So it looks like a complex situation. Can we go to you, and I suspect you might have some agreement with your colleague Tariq here on how you see the threat environment. And as you know, people sitting in the US and not in every quarters, and many in the region have pointed to your country as a source of concern and instability. But how are you seeing it in Tehran, given the fact that you faced a pretty unprecedented attack last June? And is the story over or not?
Well, very much for inviting me to share with you some of my views as an Iranian academic. I think the apparent thing is that, in the region we are using too much, use of force. And this is something that is very apparent in the region, and we saw it in bombing campaign against Iran, Israeli attack on Iran. So the obvious matter is that this use of force, too much use of force, has been supported by Western technology. And technology is becoming as a matter of disintegration. So I would say that the Western order is acting against its own order. When it goes to Iranian nuclear diplomacy, for instance, in the middle of nuclear diplomacy, we see bombing campaign against Iran. We see the IAEA to send a false report about the Iranian nuclear program and activity. We see the snapback by the Western and European countries. All of these are something that is pushing independent nations in the region to act in its own independent way. So I would say the main challenge is too much use of force. The Western technology that is supporting, for instance, the Israeli, Tariq mentioned the Israeli, technological, superiority on the air has somehow challenged the Iranian power in a way. So I would say that we are using a lot of use of force, especially in our region, that there are not much norms and regulations created to control these use of force. We see a great deal of challenge right now that should be dealt in a proper way.
Okay, thank you. Your Excellency, I wanted you to respond maybe to some of what you just heard, especially this question. I know you have been quite critical. You speak your mind openly, and you've been critical of Iraqi foreign policy, diplomacy, as kind of not exerting the influence that it could, given the strategic position here in Kurdistan and Iraq and the role it plays in the region. You heard from Tariq a lot of greater role of the region being able to solve its own problems because, of the changed geopolitical landscape. What would be your prescription for how Iraqi foreign policy could change, and where would you focus it? Would it be Israel-Palestine? Would it be another arena? Where do you think you could make a difference?
Thank you very much. I have here in the audience a dear friend, Professor Ahmed Dawoodoglu, who is a great friend and a mentor for diplomacy and others. I mean, he can correct me, actually. For any country to have an influence, to be on the table, I mean, to be counted for, not to look for others to speak for him or for the country. No, actually, you should present your cause and be confident enough only you can do that when you have an independent policy of your own, and you don't look left or right, let's say, over your shoulder. No, I think you have to do what you believe, you are convinced. For Iraq, it's Iraq destiny. It's part of the Arab fold, of the Arab community, of the Arab countries. That is destiny. I mean, since Iraq was created, definitely it should not deviate from that. It doesn't mean that Iraq should not have an excellent relation with Iran, with the Islamic Republic, or with Turkey, or with other countries. Not at all. That doesn't contradict each other at all. But I think for priorities, it has to go with the mainstream Arab countries, wherever they go. That was really what we followed after 2003. Even there are some cases which we couldn't believe, but in solidarity with the Arab consensus, we have gone. So the issue of recognition of the one-state solution or two-state solution is problematic. Iraq, I mean, even before 2003, Saddam Hussein, when he was the hardest Arab nationalist, recognized the Arab peace process. In 2002 in Beirut conference. We, after 2003, in successive Arab summit and Arab meeting, again, we embraced that Arab solution or Palestinian solution. Now, after so many years, you say, no, I'm not part of that. It really doesn't make any sense.
So you would support the
I mean, that
resolution that passed yesterday?
I think that is the consensus of the Palestinians themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? So we cannot be more Palestinians than the Palestinians. On many other issues, really, I mean, you have to be credible in dealing with international diplomacy, with other countries, with superpowers, with the American, with the European. Really, you have to be credible in many ways. I mean, to honor your commitments, to honor the agreements you have, the memorandum of understanding you have. What I hear, the feedback, really people have their own doubts whether these guys are serious or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question. In fact, I mean, for the Iraqi government or the next Iraqi government, they have to address in order to gain more credibility in their foreign policy and in their position in dealing with the rest of the world.
Thank you for that. So sticking on this issue, because this is live news, the Security Council they don't pass very much these days, but the Russians and Chinese abstained, and your government supported this resolution to move forward with the next stage of the ceasefire. What role do you see Turkey? You were very active in pushing for the ceasefire. What role do you see your country playing moving forward? And what is your thoughts on how sustainable? Because in all of our discussions here at MEPS, a big theme that's come up is it's one thing to say you have peace, it's another to actually implement the peace and make sure it's sustainable. And I think there's a lot of question marks about whether what we're seeing is truly sustainable and will really lead to a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How are you seeing that from Ankara?
Actually, in our country, our position to ceasefire for every conflicts between any countries. Let's say the problem between Russia and Ukraine, we are trying to solve. The peace process is ongoing on Turkey in Istanbul. We're trying to connect between both countries to solve the problems. And the same problem for the conflict between Israel and Palestine also. We believe if these countries all around the Middle East, let's say, if there is a peace process, it is advantage for everybody. If there is a peace process, the development of tourism, development of relation with energy, development on the, let's say, agriculture, food, it will affect everything. For that reason, our president, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he's all the time, his aim to solve the problem in Middle East, and he's trying to be peace process on that process. And we believe, firstly, we have to solve the problem in Turkey. Now, in Turkey also, we start to make a peace process. It's very important because of the last 40 years. Actually, we are spending around $2 billion for the, let's say, internal problems. Now, we are trying to improve that. And if we spend that money for the development of the country, I believe we will be in other stage, let's say.
So
And
you're optimistic on the peace process moving
yes,
forward?
we are optimistic.
Can I just ask Your Excellency, and then we'll move to the other panelists, what your view, how you think Kurdistan and Iraq at large is looking at what's happening in Turkey vis-a-vis the how are you viewing?
This was really the most positive development in Turkey that has come, this peace process. And the good thing about it, it's coming from the grassroots. It's not a governmental position or a party position. I think it's coming from the grassroots, from the nationalists to the leftists to the democratic forces. Everybody is supporting that. And also we have some indication. The last nation in Diyarbakir, I think, was indicative of how much people are attached. And they have vindicated our position all along, which President Barzani has advocated, that really you cannot resolve the Kurdish issue through armed struggle only. That is one of the means. There are days when you are forced, but really at the end of the day, we have to embrace dialogue and also an understanding and recognition. So we here in Kurdistan wholeheartedly support the peace process, and practically and operationally, I think we have been supportive of President Erdogan's initiative, or the Turkish peace initiative, which is supported. Yes, there are some complaints. It's been delays or lack of progress, but the process is moving, and we have been supportive of that. The same position we have vis-a-vis in Syria, in northeast Syria, Rojava. We have been supportive, actually, of the SDF and the Kurdish parties trying to be integrated with the new Syrian regime, the new pluralistic, democratic Syrian regime. So to answer your question, yes, we are very happy about this progress, this development, and I think it's in the benefit of the entire region. We've suffered here in Iraqi Kurdistan because of the PKK activities from Kurdistan or across the border. We have hundreds of villages still are vacated because we cannot rebuild or rehabilitate them because of the military attacks and so on. So there is benefit to everybody in this regard.
Excellent. So we're getting to manage chaos. This is sounding like a very rosy panel. So Tariq, don't spoil this for us. But I want to get back, and His Excellency just mentioned Syria, and you were talking about greater regional agency. You're seeing a lot of Arab cooperation with Turkey. It's very interesting, whether it comes to Syria, whether it comes to Gaza. But the question of Israel is, as being, and this is, you're hearing this more and more, yet at the same time, you're seeing many states in the region, especially in the Gulf, still very much turning toward Washington, and Washington is still very much supporting Israeli objectives, and in fact, very much doubling down on the Abraham Accord gambit, and it probably won't happen with the Saudis at the moment, but to be continued. But nobody's broken relations off with Israel. So despite this dramatic set of events in terms of the current Abraham Accord countries, Mohammed bin Salman is in Washington today, Washington time, or will be, looking for a similar deal that the Qataris got, some F-35s. Relations seem to be very strong. So how do you put those pieces together? What kind of Middle East are we seeing when we still have this very large U.S. role, but yet greater regional agency, more concern with Israel, and continued rapprochement with Iran?
Thank you, David. Actually, that's a great question and an opportunity maybe to clarify more what one was trying to say earlier. There's no doubt that in the short term, in the very short term, the U.S. is indispensable. The U.S. is relevant. The U.S. is the most influential actor in the region. It will help with the ceasefire. It will conduct transactions with various countries in the region, including with Mohammed bin Salman, on weapons, on security guarantees, on a host of other economic initiatives. But the notion that the U.S. is in the long term your security guarantor, or U.S. credibility as a guarantee for a regional order, I think has long been shattered, especially in the last couple of years. And you hear this everywhere. I've been quoted as saying recently, in the case of the strikes by Israel on Qatar, which was a major political shock for people in the Gulf, states, observers, and the public. I said publicly that if $500 billion in a commitment to the US, investment commitments, business commitments that the Qataris had just made prior to the strike during Trump's visit to the Gulf, cannot buy you a phone call to warn you about an incoming strike, how much faith can you still have in the so-called US security umbrella? So in the short term, the US is indispensable. We need the US. We need for the ceasefire and everything. But increasingly, the realization that regional countries have to show agency, engage in collective efforts to resolve problems, and you're seeing it, as you rightly pointed out. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt. Gulf countries are diversifying with Asian countries. Elsewhere, countries in the region are also exploring how to protect, invest in autonomy, how to ensure that, in fact, legitimate, credible security needs are being addressed, are going to be increasingly responded to and addressed by countries other than the US. As for the Abraham Accords, I think they've become a huge liability for the countries that signed onto them. Yes, they seem to be a promising initiative a few years ago, but have you seen any signatory to the Abraham Accord come out in the middle of the genocide that's taking place in Gaza and say, we're still committed, we're proud of that policy, we think this was a long-term good bet for us? I don't think so. If anything, a lot of countries have been slowly, maybe covertly downgrading that relationship. This is not to say that Israel is not going to be a part of a regional order promoting security and prosperity. It can. Hopefully it will become. But it's certainly not the current Israeli regime. Not the ideology, not the tactics, not the policies, and not the approach to countries in the region. And so thinking short-term, managing the chaos, but long-term promoting what Sheikh Khanjar, I think, was hinting at, collective effort, leadership shown by countries in the region to promote joint security and joint prosperity. And I would fall back again on my bet, my belief, that that order has to include Iran and it has to include Turkey in a collective effort for everyone.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I think it is an important reminder that, to have real peace, you have to make peace with your actual enemies who you're fighting. And
here I want to comment one thing on Tariq's statement. Really, you mentioned that the Abraham Accords have become a liability, while the attitude now is to broaden the Abraham Accord to include Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and others. So at the end of the day, everybody needs this indispensable power, you see, to intervene. Even if they are running away from the Middle East will follow them, you see, to come back.
I recognize that.
Well, and I think that's an important point to underscore, Your Excellency. It's not either or. I think there's too much of this debate. The U.S. is in, it's out, it's a complex picture. But Kian, speaking of making peace with your enemies, there's a lot in terms of how Iran is navigating the new threat environment. Um, of course, in many quarters, there's a sense that Iran is on the back foot. You're hearing American policymakers constantly talking about a new realignment, feeling very emboldened. How are you reacting to this? And we didn't, Tariq talked about the U.S. role and some, hedging with Asian powers, especially China. Is China-Russia alignment your way out of this, of survival, or are we going to be surprised at MEPS next year that there'll be some renewed U.S.-Iran dialogue? President Trump has suggested he's interested. He thinks the Iranians want to come back to the table, that they're pressured to come back to the table. Is this in the cards? Do you think this is possible, or do you see a different future?
Actually, I think that, the way they dealt with Iran was very dissatisfactory not only by Iranian government, rather by Iranian nation. And one of the main lessons to Iranian after the 12-day war was that for the first time, the Iranian realized that they need this certainty to go towards China and Russia. And I think at the same time, because before that, the Iranians were confused going to the east or the west, when they realized that the Western countries are not going to give Iran investment, technology, whatever, then they realized that they need to go to China, not liking China or Russia, but this is something determining Iranian to go. At the same time, I think on the Chinese and the Russian part, they realized that the Western countries are weakening Iran in their southern for Russia and their western border with China. So they need to somehow support Iran. So we see a new equation in a way that there is a kind of certainty in strengthening relations between Iran, China, and Russia. And I think that that is the logic, the strong logic that the Asian development needs to be somehow evolved in a non-Western way, as we see in the region after the U.S. Support of Israel and Israeli doing everything everywhere in the region, that we see no balance of power rather than the region one side, the Israeli on the other side. We see a great deal of self-reliance by the regional state to count on their own and diversifying their relations with not China and Russia. I would say that regional power and rising power like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, India, China, Russia, these countries are perceived in a non-Western world, and they need to cooperate in a way. And I think another point is that the region needs, as it was mentioned by the participant, the region needs to solve its issues before going to the West, because this has been apparent after the Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities and the U.S. bombing campaign against Iran to stop Iran, firing missiles to Israel. That was the reason that Iran has accepted ceasefire because of the U.S. bombing. We have this growing dissatisfaction inside Iran that we should not have accepted the ceasefire. We should have continued, because the Israelis do not understand the way that they want to deal with the other nations. So I think we are on the verge of a very turning point time in the region. And there has been an opportunity created in the region to cooperate with each other, I think, between Iran and countries in the region, Turkey, Iran, and other Arab countries. There is this opportunity to work together, because this is something that the region is realizing. The Western way of attituding towards the region sometimes goes to its factory default use of force, and all issues of diplomacy, human rights, international law, all of them goes in the context of double standard. You see a great deal of, different attitude by the West. So this is the real challenge we are facing right now.
Well, it's interesting, because I don't know if the audience is hearing this, but you're hearing very different versions of what the regional order should be, how to seize on opportunities that are clearly there. I mean, it is a very interesting moment where there's wide consensus that you need human security, you need development, you need to deal with displacement, deal with your people. That's what prosperity, this region in Kurdistan is a good example of that. At the same time, there's very different versions of how to structure the regional relationships to get there, whether it's corridors, whether it's political alignments with external powers. So I think it's something we need to think about. And Kayhan, what you're suggesting and what I'm hearing is that the story is not over. If there are quarters in Iran suggesting that they should not have accepted the ceasefire, we may not be done with this conflict. So before we just turn it to the audience for a very brief round of questions, if we have some, and hopefully this very distinguished group provokes some, can we just go through with a very lightning round prediction? If you're sitting in MEPS November 2026, are we back to war in Gaza? Are we back to war between Israel and Iran? Given this affects all of you, all of us, those kinds of conflicts make everything else so much more difficult. How do you read things? Where do you see things going 1 year from now? We'll end very quickly. Each of you, very quick, you know, what you predict, yes or no conflict.
I said in my intervention, one of the biggest challenges facing Iraq is this regional escalation, and this is what I meant. Really, I mean, this conflict could erupt again, in my vision, because it's not settled, it's not resolved.
Okay, I don't mean to end on a pessimistic note. Maybe someone here will say we'll be here and have managed the chaos in a year. So thank you, Your Excellency. Yeah.
Actually, it is not a matter of Iran. It's a global
Absolutely.
security is rising. Because when you're visiting Eastern European countries, they are afraid attack of Russia. And they are investing, or they are expenditure for let's say annual defense expenditure, it's reached to $6 trillion. It's a huge amount of money that they are spending for defense.
Yes.
It's a global problem, I believe.
But what would be your prediction about whether we can expect resumed conflict in Gaza or vis-a-vis U.S., Iran, Israel, Iran in a year at MEPS November 26th?
Yes, I believe if the country defense system, they are invest on that area, the others afraid to attack them, then it can be stabilized.
So you think deterrence
Otherwise,
is going to hold?
They can bomb through the airplane, and it is. Let's say it must be equalization.
Yes.
Maybe there is some pact. There is a new.
I think it's a great point that, you know, these things are not inevitable, that there are factors that would weigh against this resumption. Tariq?
I would say let's hope Trump remains committed to supporting the ceasefire and restraining Israel. If not for that, and he could change his mind at any moment, I would say there are expectations all around the region that a relapse of the conflict between Iran and Israel could happen. There would be an escalation in Lebanon, and Israel's aggressive policies towards Syria could further escalate, not to mention some of the other festering problems. So I think we are living in a moment of great uncertainty, and hence the need for efforts by countries and actors in the region to perhaps try to preempt and contain and work towards cementing some of the stability that has been at least momentarily achieved.
Very good. It gives us a motivation to keep at it, to keep peace going.
Actually, escalation can happen in every moment, but I tell you something, when the Israeli, attacked Iran, the government of Iran never expected this much solidarity from the Iranian people. The Iranian became very angry. They cannot even, digest the American bombing of Iran. So there is this angerness amongst the Iranian that could pave the way for a devastating attack by Iran to Israel. The Iranian would not attack Israel. If the Israeli attacked, the result of that attack would be the harsh Iranian response. So I would say that, the Israeli right now might think that they did this surprise attack. They have had some success in the day 1 and 2, but the Iranian, we should remember that the Iranian could stop the Israeli war machine after 50 years. The Iranian fought well, I think, against two technological power. That was something that we should take into consideration. But this time, the Iranians are ready to re-attack in a very devastating way. So I think that that would, stop the Israeli to re-attack Iran.
Okay, so assurance of deterrence. Okay, so let's open it up. Thank you all, very interesting conversation. I think we have a mixed bag. It shows we have a lot of work to do to sustain the peace and the opportunities that can be capitalized on. So I saw a couple of hands, I think, in the front. We'll just take a few questions. We'll keep the questions short. Introduce yourselves, short questions. Say who you're directing it to, if you're directing it to everyone, because the questions are between us and lunch, I think, according to the organizers. So right here in the front, yes, please. Oh, we need mics, yes?
Thank you very much. Loyal Khatib, academic and former minister. My quick comment is about the chaos in the Middle East that we cannot talk about, or it's very challenging to talk about the chaos in the Middle East in isolation with the economic chaos worldwide. We're witnessing a world that is shifting completely different from the financial system of the Bretton Woods Agreement days to a completely new system is evolving and yet to be created. This is as a result of the growing global debts that's skyrocketing, $308, 12% of which are US debts. And the whole world, when they're talking about the Middle East and remapping and reshaping a new Middle East, talking about a region that is unfortunately taking the whole world at ransom, while it holds over 45% of a rewarding commercial energy resources. And the only region that could help the world. When President Trump commented at Sharm el-Sheikh, he said, Iraq holds lots of oil and they don't know what to deal with. Many people in this country ridicule that comment. He wasn't referring to the 4.5 million barrels that Iraq producing or the 150 billion barrels that Iraq holds. He was referring to the potential of 330 billion barrels that Iraq holds, with a potential of 10 million barrels that could produce and turn itself into a swing producer. The world needs another swing producer than Saudi Arabia. By the reports of OPEC, by 2045, the world needs to add 25% of what the world producing oil today. That's 125 million barrels a day. That's 2.5 Saudi Arabias. And the only country that could play as a candidate to produce a significant amount is Iraq. Again, we really need some sort of kind of cooperation, more stability in the region to provide enough energy security that sustains global security, eventually contribute to the political security globally and the region-wise.
Thank you. Such an important point. Thank you so much, Minister. The role of my economist friends will be very happy you raised this, but again, emphasizing how important the economic opportunities are if you get the stability. Your Excellency, did you want to respond to that at all?
I agree with Dr. Luay Khatib. He's an expert. He's the former Minister of Oil in Iraq, so he knows what he is talking about. I think the key point he highlighted is political stability in the region is in the best interest of development, of investment, of trade, and this is what is lacking, and that's why we're discussing chaos in the Middle East.
Yes. Absolutely. Do we have any, I see hands in the back, we'll take just a couple more, but do we have any students whose hands are up? Because I can't see. If it's a student, wave your hand, because you'll get priority. Students? No? Okay. Oh, okay, right back here. Thank you. We are at a university, and you have such a talented cohort of young people here in Kurdistan, so let's hear from a student. Yes, speak up. I think a mic may be coming to you, but go ahead. Yeah. Oh, I said student. Okay. Okay. All right. So go ahead with your question. Introduce yourself, please, and go ahead.
Thanks so much. So as a woman, I wanted to ask you a question because all the panelists were men discussing the issue chaos and so peacemaking in the Middle East and the world without women. And thank you, Dr. Dalia, for hosting such important conversations. So my question to you all about chaos in the Middle East. What is your policy? What is your agenda for women involvement in the process? Because as you know, Kurdish women in Western Kurdistan, Rojava, being part of the process of Syrian democratic peace process, and we see how successful they are. So I would like you to comment very briefly, what is your intake on role model, Kurdish women's implementation in chaos and peace process? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And since there was a previous, point in the conversation about economic development, all the data shows that without integrating youth and especially women in the workforce, you're going to have a big challenge. So anybody have any thoughts on the role of women in these peace process, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Turkey, whether it's, this region, in general development, Tariq or Mr. Farhad?
Just a remark.
Yes.
Last week, we are in Germany, Berlin, and we have a meeting with Yazidi people. They are divided, and because of the region also, they are, especially in Turkey, they have some problems, and we are trying to solve the problems. And one of the women, they said in Turkish, I don't know how I spell in English, but they said, bizim memlekette kadınlar erken uyanır, güneşten önce uyanır. Çünkü güneşi doğuranlar bizim kadınlarımızdır. I don't know how I can spell
it.
It
sounds good, but I don't know.
But they said, the woman, it is early wake up. Before sun rising, they are wake up because they are doğurmak, doğurma.
We're hard workers.
Well, I cannot, but they said the rising of the sun, it is because of the woman.
Okay. Very good.
It is very important that in this region, the woman is very important for us. And in the peace process also, I believe the woman role is very important.
Excellent.
It must be in the politics, or they must be in cultural, they must be in the production, industry, in everywhere.
Yes, of course there's a gap between recognizing the importance of women and implementing policies that empower women. Tariq, do you have any data from Middle East Council that you want to share on that?
I guess what I wanted to say, it's hard to disagree with the thrust of the question. I think we've been engaged in this debate, discussion for over a quarter century now. There's wide recognition of the importance of integrating women in society, in the economy, in politics. And we have a lot of examples and a lot of experience to fall back on. I think what we have failed to do is to promote the kind of knowledge sharing and good practices that some countries or some societies have come up with across the region. This is going to be more challenging in the coming period because increasingly it's going to be, again, actors in the region owning this agenda. This agenda cannot be seen to be coming from the outside. It has to be couched, has to be anchored, and it has to be presented in different ways. I don't see any resistance in the way that perhaps was the case a quarter of a century ago, to promoting gender equality, the empowerment of women. But maybe if I have an opportunity now to just add my 2 cents to the question that was asked previously. I think increasingly, as you said, Dr. Luay, it's not just the international political order that's fragmenting, it's the international economic order that's fragmenting also. So globalization is in retreat, trade wars are emerging, countries are becoming more protectionist, and national security considerations are seeping into everything. Okay. These trends are going to reinforce the need for regional integration, because regionalism becomes the answer and the response by countries, and we're seeing it around the world. Asia is looking after Asia. Africa is looking after Africa. Latin America is going to look after Latin America increasingly. This is precisely another motivation, I would argue, for why regional cooperation, regional projects, both political and economic, will end up reinforcing one another. Case in point, as much as I like the IMAC and the promise of the IMAC, I am much more excited about the Middle East Development Project, for example, the corridor that links up Iraq and Qatar and the UAE with Turkey. That's organically placed, it makes economic sense, it doesn't need geopolitical underpinnings, and it helps with regional security and regional prosperity.
Okay, we ran out of time. I see there's more questions, but perhaps over the lunch you can ask the others. I'm hearing a lot of actually optimism, region, instead of one country first, region first. So maybe we need a new motto that comes from this panel, but a lot of challenges, but I'm hearing a lot of room for capitalizing on those opportunities. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our distinguished speakers and to our chair for